Thank you for coming to the May 26th Steele County Board meeting, and ask you to join me in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's been one addition to the agenda, under number 13. We're going to get an update with Tom Sexton. And with that, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All same sign, motion carries. Public comment. If you wish to share your thoughts, please provide your name and address after being acknowledged by the board chair. Each speaker has 2 minutes to express their remarks. Steele County promotes both respect for its work environment and boardroom. Speakers should maintain dignity and show respect towards others. Comments should be directed to the entire board, not to an individual commissioner, official, or staff. The board chair may limit comments if they are argumentative, disrespectful, or redundant. Please avoid name calling or abusive language, as this may result in being asked to return to your seat or leave the boardroom. No action will be taken on items presented during the public comment period unless they are on the agenda. The board may refer some inquiries to the county administrator for follow-up. At this time, is there anybody who'd like to make a public comment? Welcome.
Good evening, Melissa Zimmerman, 2525 Stony Creek Drive. Tonight, the board is being asked to approve a $1.78 million professional services contract with WSB for design of the East Side Corridor project. Because today's agenda includes the approval of a public contract, residents submitted a formal conflict of interest notice this morning, raising concerns related to Minnesota State Statute 471.87, Public Officers' Interest in Contract Penalty, which states, a public officer who is authorized to take part in any manner in making any sale, lease, or contract in official capacity shall not voluntarily have a personal financial interest in that sale, lease, or contract, or personal benefit financially therefrom. Every public officer who violates this provision is guilty of a gross misdemeanor. Unlike prior East Side Corridor environmental decisions alone, tonight's action involves approval of a government contract, which raises additional conflict of interest considerations under the statute. The submitted notices identified concerns involving potential financial interest, development interest, and institutional interest connected to East Side Corridor related decisions and approvals. Ultimately, each commissioner is individually responsible for ensuring compliance. The residents living near the proposed corridor are the ones who will ultimately bear the long-term impacts of these decisions, including increased traffic, noise, safety concerns, and changes to neighborhood conditions. This project is not a done deal. The board still has the ability to prioritize impacted residents and reconsider whether this corridor should continue moving forward through existing neighborhoods rather than alternatives farther east. At minimum, the public deserves transparency and confidence that decisions involving major public contracts are being made impartially and with full consideration of potential conflicts of financial interest. These concerns, the submitted notices, and the county's response are now part of public record. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment at this time?
Colin Whalen, 2435 Broadwood Place Northeast. In response to general agenda item number 16, approved contract proposal with WSB for the design of the East Side Corridor project of $1.78 million. Truth always comes to light. The county has long asserted that current transportation need is a primary driving factor for the ESC. When pushed, the county couldn't produce any studies or measurable data to support that narrative. Even with the flawed narrative, other alternative routes have existed for decades. The cleanest, most elegant route sits at 34th Avenue. When comparing potential options for anything in life, the person or entity that's presenting the options will oftentimes eliminate the strongest viable alternatives right out of the gate. We all know the reason this is done. By eliminating the attractive alternatives, people are left no choice but the ones being spoon-fed to them. You've eliminated the competition to leave a predetermined option as the only one standing. Now, with the actions you appear to be taking tonight, you are using the taxpayer's checkbook to further place this process into a "we can't turn back now" mentality. It's an old tactic, and the one that will keep playing out, I suspect. Truth always comes to light.
Thank you, Phil. Is there any other public comment? Is there any other public comment? That's great.
Mr. Chair, I might as well make this statement during public comment period, but at this time, I'd like to state that I have no plans for signing up for re-election for this fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Is there any correspondence?
None this evening.
Consent agenda, board's wishes.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the approval of the consent agenda as printed.
Second. Motion is second, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Tom, you're up.
That was quick.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for allowing me to jump in. I thought I'd just give a couple statements and certainly take questions as we look back on 2026 session up at the state capitol, and the dust is settling and we're getting some feedback from around the state on various things, health and such. So going into session, we knew one of the most important things we had to address was the impacts of HR 1 that was passed last July timeframe, as well as HCMC. And they were in some serious financial trouble, but we all depend on HCMC for the kind of advanced medical care that we need from a level 1 trauma center. So going into that, we had that in the background. A lot of people were working on that, and some folks were not really happy with the way it turned out. It did turn out in a way that I think will benefit the state of Minnesota over the long term. One of the biggest things we did is made sure that we just can't go talk to your neighbor and have them join the board of HCMC. We really looked to change it so some prerequisites and some background required to be on that board, like a background on being on prior medical boards, maybe a medical background, retired type person to be on that board, so we can get more of a professional board making long-term strategic decisions. Now, one thing that was wanted very badly was just an extension of what we call the ballpark tax, which is a 1 cent tax to pay for the various stadiums and things up in Hennepin County. That's due to expire very soon. We did not want to do that, because quite frankly, that translates into just another tax hike. It's just moving the checkerboard, the pieces around the checkerboard. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't actually do that. And that's why we actually found some money, reallocated it, and then changed this board requirement, plus some other little technical changes that will require accountability moving forward, so we can track where all this money is going. And believe me, there's a lot of money that was going in there, and it wasn't necessarily benefiting the patients nor Greater Minnesota. So that was really our focus going into session. A couple things we were able to do. There was a lot of concern about what we were able to get for a bonding bill. We were able to get a 1.2 billion. If you want the exact number, it's $1,199,998,000. Just under 2 billion, 1.2 billion. And then another 1.3 billion, and that's underneath the rules of what we call general obligation funds, which require an asset that we're building, so we have an asset to relate to the bonds. We'll be selling those bonds in the September timeframe to allow different projects to move forward. I know Steele County didn't ask for any bonding money this time around, but I just wanted to share what's going on with the rest of the state. Now, the city of Owatonna, as well as Wasika County, did ask for a local sales tax. We sometimes call it the local option sales tax. There was some consternation with that. We thought we'd gotten through it, but none of the projects that asked for a local option sales tax were approved on both sides of the aisle. Very, very disappointing. And so if you read the news, you can find out it was one particular co-chair that just would not let it go through within the House of Representatives, which is very unfortunate, because it's a good tool to use. it keeps money local, it allows us to actually get some projects done that we absolutely need to get done. So just a little lesson learned as we move forward and how we're gonna have to deal with that in the future, because we've used that tool very often in blue cities and red cities across the state, and it was a huge disappointment, as we want to comply with many of the rules for the Justice Center, with prisoners, as well as help our local constituents with what we want to do here in Owatonna, which was the community center. So that's the bonding portion right there. We did not have a transportation bill go through, couldn't agree on that. We did not have an energy bill, I'm on the energy committee, that did not go through. From the energy committee perspective, we were trying to give a rebate to Excel customers, because they've been paying into a program over the years that has to do with the nuclear waste and how it's stored in casks. And they're charged based on location, a significant amount of money that goes into a fund for renewable energy type projects. Well, we've got a lot of funding in that already. And what we'd like to do is basically retire that fund, give the actual benefit back to the ratepayers, because they're the ones who are paying for it. It's almost like a tax the way it's set up, and we just could not agree on that within the House. And so we'll continue to work on that in the future. Like I said, there wasn't a transportation bill, nor an environmental bill, but we were able within that bonding bill to get 47 million for local roads, 27 million for local bridges, and a reduction in the tab fee, which normally is in a transportation bill, but we were able to slide it in with the bonding bill. So what we're gonna see is about a 10 to 11% per year reduction in our tab fees. And I'm sure most of you have seen your tab fees go up significantly. We talked about it in the election 2 years ago, but we didn't feel it this year. So that results in about 119 million decrement to the transportation budget in 2027. 135 million decrement in 2028. Remember, the fiscal year for the state is from 1st of July all the way till June. However, our tabs are calendar year, so that's January through December. So that's why there's a little difference there in the way that it's set up there. Really, any questions so far? I've kind of rattled off a bunch of things, got a couple more things.
Are you happy with what you have got accomplished? Or?
I was surprised we got as much accomplished as we did. We did get a couple, I'll rattle off a couple more things, but just in overall, we were able to bring some things together towards the end. One thing Mike Caucus did on the House floor, because we were tied, but we had a speaker, is we broke a lot of these bills down into single subject bills. Now, you can claim that an omnibus bill for health is a single subject bill because it's all about health. Well, a lot of times when you look at the details, it's stretching it. One day, we had 18 bills on the floor that we passed because they were all single subjects. So that's a lot of homework, reading all those bills and all the background and the research for that. So we were averaging anywhere from 6 to 12 to 17 or 18 bills once we started getting them moving through the House towards the end of April and the end of May. So then we did have a couple omnibus bills right at the end. And part of that is we sent all those single subject bills, once we passed them off the House floor, over to the Senate. They combined them into an omnibus bill and sent them back for what we call concurrence. And we would have to basically look at a whole list of bills. Yep, we already passed those. Here's the tweaks that came out of the concurrence committee between the Senate and the House. We can agree with those and we'll pass those, and that worked out pretty good. Before I talk about one of the biggest things I wanted to mention tonight was the fact that for the Human Services IT modernization, which we talk about a lot, we changed that around, so rather than having all that money go to Minnesota IT, it really is going to come to you at the counties to enable. Well, let's start with just under $50 million to Human Services System Modernization Fund is already being set up right now, so that different counties can go and grab those funds between the 87 counties and go through it and modernize your system. County focused spending, $10 million for county technology systems, so that you can look, depending on how you qualify for different options there, use those funds. And another $3.78 million to replace the Maxis system, which we also know as the green screen system. And we did put $40 million towards that in 2025 to some additional funding. So I don't know where you are in progress with that. Love to hear about it, but we want to make sure that we continue to change that. And that will help us reduce that error rate, because there's a lot of burden on the county's shoulders for getting that error rate down so that we can qualify then for the federal funds. We realize it, we want to take care of the county's behalf, and not just have it go into a minute's black hole and no idea where those funds really ended up, quite frankly. So you'll have control of those funds for the modernization, which will be good overall. And as you execute that, I'd really like to get some feedback on what we can do even better in the future. Health policy, obviously it was all in compliance. Because of what we passed on the compliance requirements for HR 1, we should qualify for the $3.5 billion that the federal government normally pays us to support our health programs throughout the state of Minnesota every year. We want to make sure that we keep those going. One thing that's kind of an outlier is a $15 million for school-linked behavioral health grants. Don't know how that'll be executed within Steele County or Wasika County, my areas, but we want to make sure that we help with that as well. And then of course with Karma, there was a little tweak in there that we slid in that basically says if you didn't select a plan when a medical assistant applicant signs up, you're going to default to Karma, which I think Craig would support. I was making sure that stayed in there and didn't get slid out, so just made it pretty clear.
It's Karma about.
No, not at all. So that's kind of 2 pages worth of really water skiing at about 1/4 inch of water there compared to everything else we did, but probably the biggest impact in the county level. Disappointment out there on some things, especially with the local sales tax, but we'll readdress it next time around.
Excuse me, John, anybody have questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Jim.
So, without getting too deep into the weeds and making it a red or a blue issue,
Yep.
and we hear a lot about fraud in our state, and
Absolutely.
on a federal level,
Yes.
how is the state looking at that or addressing that?
Well, the biggest thing we did, I'm glad you asked, is we could not pass the Office of the Inspector General bill during the regular session last year or even on our special session day, in spite of the fact that the Senate passed it 60 votes, that's 60 votes to 7. We couldn't get it through the House. The governor didn't want it, and so he told the House members not to do it. We worked all summer as a team, negotiating that. I was on state government committee, which is a pretty significant committee for our freshmen. We've heard it there. They actually didn't want to let it through our committee, but we negotiated some things to get it through. The biggest thing that were basically deal breakers for my side of the aisle was it needed to have a law enforcement capability. Somebody within the Office of Inspector General who can actually go arrest people who are breaking the law. Because only 1 or 2 people within the current organization up in St. Paul have ever been released from their jobs. And you see that we're moving deck chairs within health services up there even now, as opposed to holding people accountable, which is very, very disappointing. We need to hold people accountable. We're all accountable for the things that we do, we're elected to do, and so it's time that other people are held accountable, certainly at the commissioner level and some of the deputy commissioners. So we wanted to see that. And we wanted to make sure that the governor couldn't just pick his inspector general. There will be an equally divided committee of the senators on both sides of the aisle, representatives, and some other appointees. Total of about 8, as I recall, who will interview and select 3 candidates for the inspector general based on some requirements to include a certification. And then those 3 names will be forwarded to the governor, whomever it is. And the governor has to pick one of those 3. So that we've got to make sure that we're not making this political. We've got to make it as even as possible, because regardless of the administration, that person will be in that role for up to 5 years unless they leave on their own for some reason, or for some reason they're prosecuted, and that would be almost like an impeachment through the legislature. So those are some key foundational things that we pushed through. And now as we implement it, we really need to address the fraud. Certainly the federal government has helped a lot when we needed to, and there's going to be more pressure on the Attorney General to keep working. Because we hear a lot about, give me more money, I need these particular things within my office in order to set up and address fraud. but I don't see a lot of what I would call prosecution being put on the news about certain people being prosecuted for fraud. It's usually the federal government. So it's very concerning. We're deeply frustrated by it, and we're gonna continue to address it all the way through. And part of that was enabled by the fact that we set up a fraud committee and held hearings, and you wouldn't believe the number of people who came forward. In fact, they're republishing the fraud report. I should have gotten it in my email right before I came over here, because I asked for it, and these technical corrections we're gonna make. And so you may see that in the paper, or if anybody wants it, please email me and I'll forward you the link. So, it's very concerning, thanks, Jim Cross.
Thanks for the update on that, and it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's unfortunate that it's so deeply divided, and it shouldn't be a partisan
Correct.
issue, but
Correct.
like many things in government, it becomes divided and partisan, it shouldn't be.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, thanks for fighting for that. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Any other questions, Rob?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Representative, this is around the top of updates. The legislature also passed update to section 241, medications in correctional facilities.
Correct.
And so that the county had sued the commissioner of corrections on that. So part of my update is that we can withdraw that lawsuit because
No, very good.
the legislature made that fix appropriately. So
You know, I remember when that came through, and it's like, everybody was like, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It passed, and all of a sudden, all of the complaints started coming in. It's very, that's why I say, you know, I like the feedback, because sometimes we're hearing only one side of the story, and we go out and search for the other side of the story, and we're not hearing anything, and we're just trying to keep that ball rolling to get as much done as we can during session. And sometimes we find out that we did something that we shouldn't have done. And we all know that we'll turn that around and fix it. We're glad that we're able to do that. Thanks, Robert, for bringing that up.
Do you want me to show you how to shut that off? It's the bottom right button.
Thank you for your strong voice at the state capitol to the people of Steele County.
Absolutely, thank you.
I respect what you're doing on that.
Thank you, thank you.
Any
Good
other
to
questions?
we're able to get some things done for Medford and along with Sarah Jasinski, so. And then I'm helping Representative Mueller with some things for Blooming Prairie, you know, it's just outside of my district. We're trying to get some funding from the environmental protection folks to do that cleanup so we can fix the tweak. So that'll be my summer project. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll be around if anyone wants to talk about anything afterwards.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment for the unmanned aerial vehicle.
So Sheriff, if you could come up and kind of explain the policy, and then the board, again, as I mentioned before the meeting, this is very similar to the process you went through for the body worn camera policy, which is, as you consider this policy, the public is given the opportunity to comment. So I think the sheriff will probably be back a second time to actually seek board approval of that policy. And again, this is in support of the drones, for which we recently received a grant.
Trust fund, not a grant.
Is that?
Yes, thank you.
For the correction.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, so basic story of it is, per statute, 626.19 of unmanned aerial vehicles, we need to have a public hearing, or excuse me, public comment, allow time for that. We have to address a policy for the sheriff's office, and we need to do that publicly to make sure this is all followed by state statute. So without reading everything verbatim, you'll see that the policies are already made. The policy is already made, and it's needing approval of that, but also is following every statute to it, right down to subdivision 9, where it allows public comment. And obviously the way we're following with writing statutes to it.
You, and I understand there was no public comments received by email or mail.
That is correct, no written comments have been received.
So this time I'll open public comment to the floor. Anybody has public comment? Anybody have public comment? This time I'll close public comment, public comment period. Is there more than that? Or?
We are asking for board approval of the sheriff's office policy, allowing for the use of unmanned aerial systems.
Board wishes.
Chair, I'll make a motion, or I'll move approval of the policy as presented.
A motion and a second, is there any discussion?
I would just like to add and thank the Harvey and Sharon West Fund for the funding that made this possible.
Absolutely.
Not a cheap process, but I think it's something that will help the safety of the citizens of Steele County. So,
Yes, sir.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, there's a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is approved professional services contract proposal with WSB for the design of the East Side Corridor project in the amount not to exceed 1.78054.2.61 and authorize the public works director to sign the contract.
So, good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. As you mentioned, what's before you tonight is a final contract, or final design contract with the East Side Corridor between Steele County and WSB Engineering. So, we all know that this project's been talked about and debated for a long time. Just a couple months ago, we completed the EAW, which is the Environmental Assessment Worksheet. So the next logical step moving forward is completing the final design in order to get this project to bid. And as you can see in the schedule, and I'll go over that a little bit. But just for everyone's reference, East Side Corridor is about 6.5 miles long with an estimated construction cost between 25 and 30 million. The reason there's such a range there is just because the final design is not done. And, we're projecting construction costs a year and a half ahead of time here, so. Some of the key components of the contract include 6.5 miles of highway design of approximately a 400-foot-long bridge over Maple Creek, design of intersection treatments at key intersections, including 4 roundabouts, ponding issues, right-of-way impacts and acquisition, trail design, railroad coordination and design, storm sewer design, wetland delineation, permitting and mitigation, private utility coordination, public engagement, where we have a number of open houses, visualization with a fly-through of the corridor, and then drone imagery and surveying. So the schedule is if you choose and approve this contract, design kickoff will be held within the next couple of weeks, and with final plans hopefully being approved by October of 2027. And the bid letting then would probably be followed up with November, December, or at the latest, January of 2028. As was mentioned, the total construction cost is about 1.78 million. Based on a $25 million construction, that would be about 7.12% of the contract. Based on a $30 million construction cost, would be 5.94% of the contract, which is less than the industry average of 8 to 10% on that. So, Steele County Public Works Departments reviewed the contract and believe that it has all of the tasks and essential items that we need to produce final design and construction documents, and we would recommend approval. So, I'd like to take any questions now, if you have any.
Any questions for Ron? Comments?
Mr. Chair, I have actually a question for Attorney Jarrett before we begin the calling the vote. So, Rob, we've heard a couple of times that there's perceived conflicts of interest amongst several of the commissioners sitting on this board. Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, so I received a copy of the perceived conflicts of interest. It's not the first time the county's received these supposed notices. As with the first time several months ago, my legal opinion remains the same, which representative democracy, it's how government works, and everyone has some interest in any project, no matter where it is in the county. However, the law is very specific, and I provided a copy of the memorandum to each of you several months ago. That remained my opinion, which is I don't see any actual conflicts of interest such that any one commissioner based on information that was provided to me, would be completed out, any vote related to this project. In particular, the concerns to me are simply invalid and do not present any legal risk to the county. And so, my legal opinion is that any member by the commissioners here can vote on this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Ron?
I did review the actual contract.
I guess, board's wishes.
Mr. Chair, I will make a motion to approve the professional services contract with WSP for design of the East Side Corridor project in an amount not to exceed $1,788,542.61.
I will second that.
Motion and a second, is there any further discussion? Seeing none-
Mr. Chair, do we need to amend the motion to include, direct the Public Works Director to sign the contract? Or authorize the Public Works Director to sign the contract?
I will add that to
Amend the motion.
It's fine.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a approved renewal of IUP 2010-05 AJD Companies LLC / Meister Pit for 21 conditions based on the findings of fact.
This item was tabled, to allow time for Rob's professional opinion on, if the county can accept alternatives to a surety bond and if bonds should be required. Just in recap, Canals of JJD Companies is requesting renewal of an interim use permit for an existing sand and gravel pit located in Lime Township. The planning commission recommends approval of 21 conditions, which includes changes to 3 conditions and to remove the condition regarding bond requirements. And staff recommends approval of 22 conditions with the recommended changes to the 3 conditions, and for the board to consider keeping the condition regarding the handle sureties.
Board's wishes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So walk me through it again. What's changed since the last time?
We've obtained Rod's professional opinion. The question, did you want to do it?
Yeah, I can talk about it. Did you get a copy of my memo and what I did? Okay. It should have been, in its public opinion, that the county can accept alternatives to a surety bond. And the county can do so in any manner it so chooses, whether that be a mortgage, cash deposit, irrevocable letter of credit, or any other financial security. So the county can do that if so chooses. Other counties do that as well. So that's the first question. So if you so choose to continue the policy or the general policy asking for some kind of surety bond, you can ask for an alternative or allow an alternative as well. The second opinion is that, my opinion is that it's best practice to have some kind of surety on both on IUP and a CUP, just given the public interest in these kind of matters. Also regarding treating everyone as fairly as we can. The Planning and Zoning Commission years ago had changed approaches, and so this has recently come up on this specific IUP, and speaking with the attorney that represents this specific permit holder, it sounds that he is in agreement with do some alternative. Should the board choose to ask for a bond, he does not, obviously does not desire a full bond, but would agree to some other type of bond or other type of surety. Staff recommendation is to ask for a $5,000 per acre which would be 12.5 active acres, so 12.5 times 5,000 would be $62,000. The actual process of how to do that, since we've never done before, we have to work with staff and maybe ask you to direct staff to figure that out, on how to record it or go through that process. Should the board wish to require a bond, and the board doesn't have to require a bond either, right? So at the end of the day, the planning commission is recommending no bond, and this board has the full authority to not require a bond. But note that you're probably going to have a bunch of other businesses coming and asking for better bonds to be business as well, because this board has traditionally accepted bonds and required a bond, specifically on CUPs, not on IUPs. Is that correct? The other way around. Because, anyway, nonetheless, you have questions?
Mr. Chair, I think traditionally, meaning as recent as a year ago, I mean, prior to that, we didn't require it. Am I correct?
Since 2020.
It's been that long already?
Yeah, so
Oh.
all of our current IUPs do have surety bonds.
And CUPs don't, and we discussed at the last meeting that CUPs we can put a bond on.
Yeah, because they're not, they don't expire. They're just reviewed every 5 years. So we're just looking at them, making sure that they're meeting their conditions, and we can't add conditions unless they are being, they're not following conditions.
Negligent.
Mhm.
So I think just to clarify, you can require performance bonds for CUPs, because CUPs is a privilege to operate a business above and beyond. However, we do have existing CUPs, they run with the land, they are not specific to an individual, so you would not be able to alter the terms of the existing CUPs. However, if this particular applicant, for example, says, you know what, I'm now the landowner, I want to pursue a CUP, that would be deemed a new CUP, and the board would have the same opportunity to impose some type of surety, performance bond, or otherwise on this particular site if they chose to move beyond the IUP. So what we have is a practice, it did not rise to the level of company policy to require performance bonds for IUPs. We do not currently have an alternative form of security for this type of license, because that's in essence what an IUP is, it's a privilege to conduct a business. So if the board chooses to require some type of surety, but allow for an alternative, I would ask that the board consider modifying the language of the IUP to require surety, but on terms and conditions deemed acceptable or appropriate to our planning and zoning director and county attorney, and allow those conversations to happen. The language of the IUP, however, in your agenda packet is as it was presented by the planning commission, not as staff is recommending.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Brady.
I am gonna be recusing myself from voting on this because of possible conflict of interest, but I am on the planning and zoning committee, and I was there that night. It was a public meeting, it was stated ahead of time, it was open to public for public comment. The debate went on for an hour, and then we had our meeting a couple weeks ago, but then I've had questions from people on the planning and zoning committee, because that's what they came up with the first time, and then in our last meeting, the staff recommended different than they had. And then, that's why they asked me if the staff is gonna be changing things, what is the sense of having a planning and zoning committee? So, I'm just bringing forward what.
Mr. Chair, if I can ask you a question, what was the reasoning for striking the bond?
There's the chairman of the board there, you can ask him. I can give you my interpretation.
I mean,
I can give you my interpretation from being there.
if we've
It might not be
required
exactly
it
the same as his.
since 2020, and they've all agreed, I just wanna know what the rationale was for striking it on this particular one.
I don't know if it's
Can I
public
stand and
comment.
answer that question?
I think, that's what's being asked, but maybe you can also say why we started putting the bonds on in 2020 and why the change of our.
Please.
Yeah, I pushed this really hard in 2020 to put the bonds on the gravel pits because we were having gravel pit issues to where they were opening up these gravel pits, they weren't paying the landowners the money. There was no gravel tax being paid on a specific gravel pit, and it sat idle for 12 years on the road that I lived on. And nothing could be done by it. The county had no recourse to go back and reclaim it, put it back how it could be. So I got a hold of Waseca County, I got a hold of Rice County, and I asked them, what are you guys doing on your gravel pits? And they said, we are putting bonds on them. And every county has a different price per acre for their bonds. And I got a hold of Trent today, in Rice County. I talked to him for 20 minutes, just asking him, what are you guys doing on these gravel pits? You know, we got the CUPs that we can't really touch, and we got the IUPs where we're putting them on, but it's not fair to the CUP, or the IUPs, because the CUPs don't have to pay this bond, and they can charge less, the CUPs, from what the IUPs can. So it all goes in the cost of the gravel for what the IUPs gotta charge and everything, and it all comes back to us, so they gotta charge more, us taxpayers gotta pay more. So Trent was telling me there in Rice County that they are eliminating a lot of these CUPs and turning them in, when that 5 years goes up, they're kind of getting rid of the CUPs and turning them into an IUP, and then the IUPs, they can change then and put a bond on them, so it's fair across the board. So that's just something that I think would be good. The reason as a board why we kind of changed it was because we thought, well, if you're gonna charge one person and not charge the other, it's not really fair. Or someone's gonna do a bid on gravel and they gotta pay a bond, and this person doesn't have to pay a bond, they can lose, you know, a business or, you know, a deal on that. So, when we brought it up, last month at the planning and zoning, we all kind of sat and said, hey, it's all or none. You know, we just kind of said, we're not gonna, you know, these guys that got a CUP have been here forever, we can't touch them, but these guys over here with an IUP, we can put it on. And then we find out that we did have an IUP that never had a bond, okay? And I got screamed from a couple people that said, hey, this gravel pit didn't have a bond, and the person that bought it tried to go back on the bond to get it reclaimed, and there was no bond on it. So my question is, we can put all the conditions, all we want, on all these gravel pits and do anything, but is anybody going and make sure these conditions are being met? So, you know, and I had 2 months ago, I asked Amber and I asked the board, what is the purpose of the planning and zoning board? We make all these recommendations and do everything, we hand it to the county commissioners to get passed, and then we find out that these conditions aren't being met. What are they doing? We don't know. And then we find out there wasn't a bond, so why was this gravel pit even open when there was no bond? They didn't meet the conditions, they didn't have a bond, you guys, no one went back and checked it, there was no bond on this gravel pit. That's not fair for the rest of the guys that got a gravel pit that paid their bond. So, you know, so I just decided at the meeting, you know, it's all or none. You know, I mean, I'd love to have the bonds on us, we could go back and make sure these gravel pits are put back and they're really nice looking at the end, but you can't do the CUPs, the gravel pits have been there forever, and there's a lot of holes in the ground all around Lamont Township where I live, that they just sit there, and, you know, there's nothing we can do with the CUP gravel pits. So, I don't know if you guys as a board can decide that when the conditional use permits come up, can you say, hey, we're not gonna do the conditional use permits anymore, we're gonna drop that and go to an IUP? And then when you got an IUP, then we can put a bond on it, and it's fair all along, all together.
Thanks, Gary.
Just shooting it towards you guys.
Thanks for the update on it.
Yep.
Mr. Chair. Renee, I think you made a comment that it didn't rise to a policy level, or, I don't know how you stated that.
It is an established practice It's one that's documented, however, I can't find anything that says that the board officially adopted it as a policy. And if the chair wouldn't mind, I would like to just expound, the planning commission serves a very important role, that they are your finders of fact. They conduct the public hearings. They are not, however, the final decision maker, that is the board. So in the absence of the planning commission, it would be the board that conducts those public hearings. But Steele County, as well as most counties, most municipalities, have chosen to bring in a citizen advisory board to conduct those public hearings and to prepare those findings, prepare those conditions, and bring them forward for board consideration. But again, you are not mandated or obligated to follow. However, it's been the practice of this board, as long as I've been here, that you generally adopt the recommendations of the planning commission. However, you have a situation here where the planning commission is choosing to go contrary to the established practice with regard to IUPs, which is why staff stepped up and said, it is our advice to the board to put that condition back in, as that is your established practice with regard to IUPs, until such time as a formal policy can be considered and adopted by the board for the future. And again, the county attorney looked at the practice, looked at the policy in terms of why we would have it, not policy meaning, formally adopted principle of the board. And yes, there could be some alternatives. We found the legal authority for doing that. But right now we don't have an established practice, which is why I asked the board, if you're gonna consider following the established practice, that perhaps some latitude could be given to our planning and zoning director and to our county attorney to work with the applicant to determine what that alternative security could be for this particular incident.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Henry?
So I think in my time as a commissioner, Gary, to your point, I think I can only remember one time that this board has acted outside of what the commission has recommended. So we lean heavily on the commission and respect your decisions. There may be times when we have questions, and this is one of those times, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's only been one time.
It was a driveway in 2017.
I think it might have been, so. So we,
one of the first votes we had.
yeah, and you guys work hard, we appreciate that. You have a lot of insight, and you do a lot of the front end work that, for us, really, so we appreciate that. My question, I guess, I have a question, maybe for Rob. I don't even know how to phrase it. So this is a contract between a landowner and an excavator, or whoever wants to go in and mine this gravel. That's a contract between those two, right? So if I own the property and I'm hiring JJD to come in, or we set up an agreement and they come in and they're gonna take some gravel out and sell it. If they don't fix it, that's my issue with them. It shouldn't be a county issue. Or am I interpreting it wrong?
Well, the county has the authority to basically plan, zone, ordinance, set rules in place to ensure public health and public safety, and that's the way that otherwise it is a private, person-to-person contract that the county has no authority over. And so, as the zoning chair said, that's how we got into this quandary in the first place, is there wasn't bonds, and there was no way to do anything about it. And so this is about the only way to have some kind of government hook in the county to ensure compliance. And so, yeah, you're viewing it correctly, that it is a private issue, but then what is the county's stake in that issue? That's how this comes about, is that we set up terms and conditions to allow that use of the land in such a way, otherwise it would not be allowed use.
Well, hence in 2020, why the planning commission recommended we put bonds in place. Now here we are in 2026, and we're saying we should take them away. I guess I'm confused on, not that long ago we were over here, now we're over here, so.
And so I would back into both the commission, I apologize, the commission hasn't been able to attend the meetings due to my schedule. But the purpose of any condition really is for health, safety, and general welfare. It's not a monetary issue. It's the state to ensure the public's interest in the use of that land, and then specifically in the use of gravel pits, is the ability to restore that land to some other, so the original ability to use it, or what not always do have pits everywhere, that can't be restored. And yes, there was an issue since I've been here that there was not a bond in place, and it was a private issue, and the county could not be involved. And that came to my desk, and I said, I can't help you because the county is not have any involvement in this.
So, Mr. Chair, I think I've heard Commissioner Brady say a couple of times, you know, you put these conditions in place, and how we need to, the county needs to monitor those conditions. Example, 4-to-1 slope. It's put back to an 8-to-1 slope. County's not monitoring it. Somebody goes out there and gets hurt, who's on the hook?
Well, that's a very complex issue.
Well,
Who's on the hook?
But my
But
point,
yes.
I think you get the point, right?
Yes, I gather your point, and I went to a herd, and that's a matter of staffing and resources and how much we're checking up on our permits. We do have permit enforcement, that, Amber will bring me something, and then we'll go forward on enforcement, whether that be a letter, where we gain compliance just by simply a letter, or we gain compliance with court action, a variety of different ways. And so far, in almost 2 years, the letter has done enough, and that gains compliance, but it's an ever evolving issue in all of our permits, which is, are they in compliance with the terms that we've set? And if not, where are we going involved? It's a straight resource issue.
And the conditions also protect the neighbors and the roads and that's wrong.
So, but as Renee, pointed out, this board is the ultimate, decision maker on these issues, and has to, make that determination based on, obviously, each individual vote, but, based on the findings of fact and ensuring that the findings of fact are, conditions are supported by the findings of fact as well.
I ask one more question? So we get these bonds, does the county really have legal action to go on someone's private property to use that bond to have somebody else go do something? That's a question that everyone's asking me.
Say that one more time.
So we go after someone that had a bond, okay? And the person says, no, this is my property, I own it, you can't come on my property to redo it. Can the county somehow take that bond and still go on their property if they don't have permission to go on their property?
I'm not able to answer that specific question right now.
So what good would the bond be then, if we got that bond for that specific thing, is what I'm getting approached all the time on, is we got a bond, we can go back, we can do that, we can reclaim that land, but the landowner says, no, you ain't going on my property. The county can't say, yes, we are, because there'd be a lawsuit there, so is the bond really good or not?
That's why we'd have to institute legal action.
How do you even get on the property to inspect that?
We're getting way down.
Well, I know, but
Yes.
that makes a difference.
Correct, right. There is a difference, and we'd have to seek court orders to do so.
Right.
Which we have done for other issues.
Generally, the applicant is giving permission to enter the property as a condition of applying for the privilege to engage in this activity. So this is no longer a private residence that we can't just casually go into somebody's home, but when you are applying for an IUP, in this case, to run, basically an excavation arrangement, you have given to the county the permission to go in and assess and evaluate the conditions under which they have been approved to perform or to undertake these activities. So it does matter to have the IUP, it does matter to have a CUP, because if there's showing of non-compliance, we have the ability to reopen the CUP and revoke the CUP. And now that privilege has been taken away and damages can then be undertaken. Yes, it's a legal process. Is it easy? No. We would hope for voluntary compliance, but we have to go with kind of what we think to be sort of that average run-of-the-mill approach and hope that people will perform to the best of their ability, and with maybe a letter or possibly something more stern, that they would abide by the conditions under which they were granted that business purpose. So it's not perfect. I mean, I've been dealing with this stuff for probably 30-some years, and it's never easy and it's never perfect, but we need to make sure that we've got some protection for the county in this case, and that's what the security is for.
Any further discussion? The staff's recommendation is to have 22 conditions, the planning commission is 21 conditions. Board's wishes.
So we're, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
so the differences are striking number 20, is that right?
If I may, for the board, staff would be recommending that 20 would remain a condition as presented. So we would recommend approval of the IUP, but with the language pre-strike, if you want to put it that way. So the stricken language of 20 as proposed by the planning commission would come back in. However, what I'm proposing for board consideration is that it would either be a bond or other approved financial security as determined necessary and appropriate by our planning and zoning director and county attorney. And then what is in your packet on page 232 is item 20, which is, there's no strike through there, which is trucks hauling material to and from the site shall not use Jake brakes, would be renumbered as 21, and that the new 22, currently 21, reading once issued, this IUP may be revoked following notice and hearing. So that's what, as staff, we're recommending for the board's action this evening. The other changes, as you see in paragraph 11, the other change to the term of the would be as proposed by the planning commission. Would you like me to repeat? Ideally, we would have presented to you a cleaned up version of what staff is recommending. My apologies, we did not do that. Again, this happens so infrequently that having that as an alternative for the board would have been a good way to propose and or proceed, and we'll do that in the future. So if you'd like, I can repeat my recommendation.
Yes, please.
So what we are recommending is IUP 2010-05 be approved as presented in your board packet, starting on page 230, continuing over to 231 and 232, but with the following modifications. Paragraph 20 would read, the permittee or operator shall furnish a bond or other financial security as approved by the county. In this case, I would say as approved by the county's planning and zoning director and county attorney for potential haul road repair or for site restoration. The bond or other approved financial surety shall be in the amount of $5,000 per permitted acre for a total of $125,000 and remain in place for 6 years from the date of issuance of the permit. The total amount of the surety can also be modified by the mutual agreement of the planning and zoning director and the county attorney. Paragraph 21 would read, trucks hauling material to and from this site shall not use Jake brakes. And paragraph 22 would read, once issued, this IUP may be revoked following notice and hearing and upon findings established by the planning commission that the subject property and or use is not in compliance with the conditions of approval as stated herein.
I have one question I gotta ask too. If you own the land and you got an IUP, why do you need a bond to protect yourself? How would you answer that?
Well, again, we're talking about an interesting history in the fact that any new CUPs, the board could certainly require some type of surety. However, at the time that this was proposed back in 2020, there were already existing CUPs. Conditional use permits are land rights. They run with the land, so they are not specific to an owner or operator. IUPs were something that was allowed. In fact, it was kind of a weird deal back in the day. You didn't even have an IUP unless you were zoning something out of existence, but the state amended the statutory guidance for uses and said you can have an interim use. It operates as a license. So it's an interim use permit. It is specific to the licensee and does not run with the land. So a change in licensee should have resulted in the revocation of the IUP. It didn't. It was allowed to be transferred to a new operator, so the conditions have been carried forward. So in this case, since JJD acquired the land, this IUP could be simply removed from existence, but that means that they still have to come in for a CUP for that use. That would give the board the opportunity to consider additional security. So based on my experience, no legal advice, I'm not in that role, but any time that a license or a permit was granted, there was always some type of surety required to protect the interest of the local government unit, so city or county. So the practice, as the county attorney has identified, is something that is done routinely and regularly. Steele County, however, when it made that transition in 2020, kind of had this situation where those existing CUPs, they already run with the land, their legal right, they were probably, and I think that's where Dale Ullman, as our previous planning and zoning director, was like, I don't think we wanna tackle that underlying right, because it does run with the land. CUPs are not forever, however, if the use is discontinued for a continuous period of time of 1 year or longer, a CUP can be, in essence, deemed no longer enforceable, which could reopen the door. So CUPs aren't permanent, but they're very, very long-term because of the nature. It's a property right that's being granted.
I have a question first. So the other approved securities, who determines if it's approved security, if they didn't do a bond?
Well, right now, what we have in our practice is that it's a performance bond. However, there is practice outside of security performance bonds to allow for irrevocable letters of credit, cash bonds, an actual physical deposit of cash, although I don't know that our finance director would want to be in the business of holding cash. However, but there are other alternatives that I think could be negotiated or discussed with the applicant. Right now, however, we haven't had those negotiations, and we're running up against the 60-day rule, which has already been extended once. So action does need to be taken by the board. You can either go with the language as it was, which is that it's a performance bond, or I'm proposing that you could give the planning and zoning director and the county attorney the latitude to negotiate, in essence, an alternative form of collateral or security in this case.
We're gonna put an extra burden on the planning department?
It would for a little bit, but I think it would be manageable. And then just for clarification, they had 20, permitted acres, so that previous amount was for the, before the split happened, it should be for 100,000. So 125.
Mr. Chair. So before we call the vote, can we have some discussion on maybe updating a policy or getting a policy in line with what Gary brought up on the CUPs and the IUPs, so we have some consistency that speaks to, we should do them all the same or no?
Mr. Chair, I was gonna ask Amber to check with some other counties to see what their procedures and policies are. So it might give us some direction as to how to clarify the situation and how they have basically converted from a CUP to an IUP, some of those different practices. So it would give us some guidelines to at least look at in researching how we can make this basically fair for everybody.
So, absent a formal policy, we need to deal with the IEP. However, if it is the board's wish for staff to develop language, between the county attorney's office, myself, Amber, we could certainly work on something. I would want the planning commission's input on a proposed policy. We could bring that forward to the board for a more formal consideration, maybe starting with a draft at a work session like we typically do, and then bringing back some type of an ordinance change that could formally memorialize your approach going forward. We just don't have that.
But for this one, I think with, first of all, the timing of it, and I would move that we would approve this with the corrected findings of fact that Renee stated. It sounds like both parties are kind of amiable to that. And, but then we need to get this straightened out so that everybody's treated the same. I totally agree with you. But I don't want the counties to be sitting there and be liable for fixing a problem that should have been taken care of.
And what I'm proposing to modify are the conditions, not the findings of fact.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah.
So what would be the can you read number 20 again, the proposed modification?
And is the correct amount 100,000?
Yes.
At the last meeting, it was 12 acres, 60,000. There's like 8 or 10 acres untouched, that's farm ground right now.
So, traditionally, we have done it on permitted acres, and that's across the board. The previous permit holders had that entire land as permitted acres and, that farmland as future acres. So that was what it was based on, was the permitted acres. So if we're gonna just permit those 12.5 acres, we would ask that they, stake it out, and, if they go over that, then we can look at revocation.
And what would be the surety?
85,000 per, permitted acre still, so it'd be 12.5 acres times 5,000.
I personally think that's a reasonable request.
Mr. Chair, so did you say the surety can come in, it doesn't have to be in a bond, it can be in a different form?
Correct, it could be a mortgage,
Right.
it could be a lien on heavy equipment, it could be a variety of things.
Or a credit?
Yeah, so I think my attorney and Rob here had a conversation today. We prefer, like, we don't need money on the property. So versus a $15,000 restoration bond, we'd rather give you a mortgage of the $60,000, hold it in place until if the next renewal's up.
Till the 6 years.
The mortgage is cheap to file a mortgage.
Yeah, but we can't foreclose on a mortgage. That's our problem. So yes, that's where I would want our county attorney, your attorney, and our planning and zoning director to work on something. Not that there would be any kind of conversation here this evening. So the question was, what would be the new language? And the term that you used is permitted,
Permitted acre.
and then with appropriate staking. So finding 20, or in this case, condition 20 would read, the permittee or operator shall furnish bond or other financial surety as approved by the county attorney and planning and zoning director for potential haul road repair and for site restoration. The bond or other financial surety shall be in the amount of $5,000 per permitted acre for a total of $62,500, assuming 12.5 permitted acres, and will remain in place for 6 years from the date of issuance of the permit. All area outside of the permitted acreage would need to be appropriately staked, and entry into the staked areas may result in a revocation of the CUP.
Yeah. The other thing was, I think originally, we were going for 4 years because the bond was so much more for 6 years. So we're going for the full 5 years for a permit, correct? Versus the 4 years, that'd be great.
Renee, you read 6?
So it should be 5. I'll take another stab at that then. Anything else? Okay. So the permittee or operator shall furnish bond or other financial surety as approved by the county attorney and planning and zoning director for potential haul road repair and for site restoration. The bond or other financial surety shall be in an amount of $5,000 per permitted acre for a total of $62,500, assuming 12.5 acres permitted, and remain in place for 5 years from the date of issuance of the permit. All area outside of the approved permitted acreage will be staked, and any entry or intrusion into the staked area may result in the revocation of the CUP.
I would,
My motion will stay.
I would second that motion. I like the idea that we should be using their advice or working with them to come to some resolution or agreement.
And can we put that on every now IUPs that are coming, we can do not just a bond, but they can do some kind of letter of credit or something on all of them? Can we use across the board?
I think that
So it's
would
fair.
be you guys working together to come up with, some sort of,
A policy for the
resolution
board
or
to
a policy.
formally-
Well, I also wanna look at the CUPs too, so, I mean, your point is well taken, everybody needs to be treated the same.
Right.
So,
And like I said,
that's.
Rice
my
County
point. I know
right
what some
now
other
is kind of
counties are
changing
doing.
their CUPs to IUPs, so.
So we have a motion and a second.
There's a motion and a second, is there any further discussion?
May I just, for Rebecca's sake, who made the motion? Was it Commissioner Krieger, and then who seconded? And I believe that Commissioner Brady intends to abstain.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for understanding, we had to go through this process, so.
Thank you.
Informational items, Public Works Committee minutes are in your packet. The Land Use and Records Committee minutes from May 14th are also in the packet. Are there any presentations this time?
None this evening.
Commissioner reports, Rob.
Only update was on that lawsuit, I'm gonna withdraw the lawsuits. Nothing
Good news, thanks.
further. Very good.
That's great.
May 14th, I had Land Use and Records. May 15th, I attended a Health Finders event on behalf of South Country Health Alliance. May 18th, we had an HMA update on our Human Services Department progress. May 19th, we had Men Prairie Finance and Public and Joint Powers Board. May 21st, we had Community Health Board, and I also have a Smart Trails meeting on that day. May 25th, I attended the Memorial Day Parade and the ceremony at the Four Seasons Center, which was really well attended this year. It was a nice event. And May 26th, today, we had the Children's Mental Health Collaborative meeting and the work session before this meeting.
Thank you. Jim.
May 14th, Land Use and Records. On May 18th, meeting at Spiro. Today, I had a Children's Mental Health Collaborative this morning and a work session before this meeting.
Thank you much. Renee, what do you have for us?
A couple of things. One, we had a community-wide cybersecurity tabletop last Thursday that did include OPU, the city of Owatonna, the school district, and the county. We used a cybersecurity attack as the basis for our tabletop and really talked about how we collaboratively support one another, but more importantly, we've learned a fair amount through our own efforts and found that this was a good opportunity for sharing. Here's what we've learned, here's things that we can do differently. So I'm pretty excited about working further with different types of scenarios. Second, Bennett Hoffman, our new Human Services Director, starts next Monday, June 1st, which is why I cannot attend the regional meeting. It's not for my grandson, it is for Bennett Hoffman's first day. He's got a full day of meetings, and so I felt like I couldn't be away for that date. And then in terms of status, between me, Gina, Ashley, and probably any other staff member that gets roped in, we've been having regular operational meetings with different minute teams, all painful. I think that's an easy, fair way to describe them. Today we discussed what the new return address will look like on the eligibility notifications coming out of METS. So yes, we will continue with this process, and we're still hopeful that all of those systems will be live 1/1/27. Representative Sexton, thank you for your effort. However, all of that money does not get us anywhere closer to where Steele County needs to be, because even the Maxis pilot that they're identifying won't even be rolled out for all counties until probably late 27, maybe early 28.
Well, they can't complain about funding that.
No, they can't, that's for sure. So, but thank you for your effort, and I'm hopeful that we can maybe see some progress soon.
Yeah. But everything on the state level works just wonderfully.
Thanks, Renee. Jim?
May 18th, a Human Services Subcommittee meeting, May 19th, Mid Prairie Joint Powers Board meeting, and our work session meeting here today.
Thank you. Josh?
On the 14th, excuse me, I had the Southeast Emergency Services. Also on the 14th, I had Workforce Development. On the 18th, I had Spiro Board. On the 19th, I joined the Fairgrounds Bituminous discussion. On the 25th, I also attended the Memorial Day Parade in the program, and I would agree it was pretty cool. On the 26th, this morning, I had the Executive Committee meeting for SEMCAC, and then the work session today.
Thank you much. I attended the Historical Society meeting on Monday and the Public Health meeting on Thursday. At this time, I want to thank everybody for coming and inform me that we're going into closed session for the purpose to develop an offer for purchase of 213 South Oak Street pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 subdivision 3C3. And I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Do we need to have this?
I will say, just to let your attorney side, it isn't too long, but if there are any follow-up questions, I have to be available for you.
Great.
You know, it's probably gonna be a while.
Long discussion?
It might be, I think we can, is it all right with you guys, we can email you if we have questions, if you don't mind,
It's up to you, I just wanna make sure I'm available.
I appreciate that, we don't want you to have to hang around, because it might be a while.
I got his-
We all know how to get ahold of you.
I got a speed dial number.
Yeah.
He does. Well, it's great to stop by and,
Keep up the good work.
thanks.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
See you later.
I can.
Could you just sneak off?
Oh, certainly, yeah.